All right. Hello, everyone. Testing the microphone. Looks good. Keep me right if it's not working. Welcome to Improving Your Eyesight, the Rewire approach. So, if you're new here, my name's James. I make videos on how your brain and nervous system links to movement. And one of the topics that comes up all the time for us, I think, since the early days of the channel has been how to improve your vision, how to improve your eyesight. Those are two different things, and I'm going to define them. And I guess I've got a few caveats and a few opinions on, how possible is it to make those things work, to make those things happen. But let's just jump into it. So first of all, what is the difference talking about eyesight versus talking about vision? Eyesight, basically, I'm talking about the visual acuity side of things. So generally, your ability to see stuff in the world, your brain processing those images, that is what I'm going to call eyesight. Vision is a lot more all-encompassing. So there's going to be what your brain processes, but also how your eyes move, how your eyes, lock onto a target, track a moving object. Vision is like the bigger picture, but today we're just going to be focusing on the eyesight. Now, most of the time when people are asking, they're asking about, how do I improve my visual acuity so that I don't need glasses anymore? But anything that we talk about in this video could also be referring to vision problems that aren't getting better. So, you go see your optician or ophthalmologist, whatever you go see, and they give you some kind of solution, but it doesn't seem to be having long-term effects, long-term improvements, then this video is for you. This is what we want to be looking out for. So when it comes to improving your eyesight, we kind of just have to go through the kind of hierarchy chain. So there's stuff that we can do with your eyes for sure, but your eyes actually depend on quite a lot of other things going on in your body. And that's basically the difficult part of trying to diagnose, how do you improve your vision? How do you improve your eyesight? Sometimes you need to look at your eyes, and sometimes you need to look at a whole bunch of other stuff. So let's talk about the eyes first. And when it comes to trying to improve your vision, get rid of that glasses prescription, eyes are probably the easiest way to think about training, because it essentially just works the same way that weight training works for other muscles in the body. But what we're trying to work is the muscles around the lens of the eye. And if you want to improve your vision, the technique is just called active focus. So that's kind of, invented or popularized by a guy called Jake Steiner. Has a course called End Myopia. Pretty interesting website to go visit, but active focus is a big part of the work that they do there. And essentially what it involves is getting an eye chart, or just getting some text on a wall, something that you can stare at, that you can see whether it's in focus or out of focus, and you're just going to walk backwards until you can't see until you reach the limit where the text is about to start to blur. Okay. And then once you've reached that limit, so once you can't go any further back, you're going to take one little step backwards. So now everything starts to blur. The eyes struggle to focus. And your job is just to see if you can bring it back into focus, obviously, without leaning forwards. The idea is to try and force the eyes to figure out how to do this on their own. It's a pretty cool process. If you never tried it, if you've never paid much attention to what your eyes do when they're trying to focus, you don't necessarily feel what the contractions inside your eyes feel like. But over time, if you practice it enough, you will start to notice that there are certain things that you can do in order to bring something into focus and move it away from focus. And uh, as you spend longer and longer, as the same as when you spend longer and longer with any other skill, this will start to take hold. It starts to solidify a little bit, and then you start to actually be able to feel the process of trying to focus harder using just the muscles of the lens of the eye. Now, the important thing when you're doing this is obviously you don't want to be straining the eyes in any other way. So you don't want to have stuff going on with your eyebrows, with your face muscles. You don't want to feel tension in your neck. Everything's got to stay super relaxed. And then you're just going to play with it. So, once things go out of focus and you can't hold it anymore, you assume that's because the muscle's getting tired. Going to take a little step forwards. Everything should come back into focus. So you're going to hold that for a little bit longer. Then you're going to take a step backwards, maybe. It goes blurry again. And so you're just kind of hovering around that kind of area for, however long you're going to go. 20 minutes in a day could be a pretty intense workout with this. And that's really the crux of it. If the reason that your eyesight is failing is specifically because those muscles aren't strong enough, then all we need to do to solve the problem is to strengthen up the muscles. And that is kind of the best version of that you can get. Now, another thing that you might hear people play with is the idea of using plus lenses. So if you are short-sighted, you can't see things far away. The reverse of all this as well is true if you're long-sighted. You could do the same thing with close-up. But anyway, if you're short-sighted, you're struggling to see things far away, you usually will be prescribed contact lenses with a negative number on it. That's to change the light refraction in a certain way so that you can focus on it specifically. But what would happen if you actually, instead of using negative lenses, you actually started using plus lenses? And what this is going to do is actually going to refract the light slightly the wrong way. And then that means your eyes actually have to work harder. They have to actually contract further in order to keep the same focus as you had previously. So if I'm just in this room, my eyes need to contract a certain amount to be able to see all the different things that are in the room. If I put on those plus lenses, then it's going to be harder to see everything. So my eyes just by default are going to be forced to work a little bit harder than before. This is a pretty cool way to almost like imagine, instead of now a weightlifting workout like we talked about with the active focus, this is almost like wearing a weighted vest. So something that you're just getting the reps in as you move about your day. And people report that can be pretty effective as well. Now, the only other final thing that I'll say about the eyes is it can be a pretty good idea to make sure that both eyes are equally strong before you go ahead and do any of this, okay? And the way we're going to do that is through something called a Brock string. Now, if I was better at being prepared, I would have one of these around. I think I've got one down here. A Brock string is essentially a piece of string with a couple of beads on it, okay? You can buy these at massively inflated prices on Amazon, or you can just get, any bit of string, any bit of rope, attach some beads on, and you've got your very own homemade Brock string that you can use to test the kind of binocular vision of your eyes. Now, I'm not going to go into that too much in this video, but there is a Brock string video on our channel. Just search for it, and that will take you through everything that you need to do with the Brock string to train the difference between the two eyes so that they're a bit more equalized. Generally, if you're trying to do kind of vision training to improve your eyesight and it's not working, a lot of the time, if you have eyes that are differing in their strength, the brain's going to find that really, really confusing and really, really hard to know what to do with the information. And so what it normally resorts to is whatever the stronger eye is, it just pays attention to that and it won't pay attention to the weaker eye. And that becomes a problem when you're trying to do vision training and stuff, because the brain isn't going to fight to create an even bigger difference between these two. It's would rather that things stayed a little bit more similar. So if it does need to use the other eye, that it's not having to retrain and rethink and reprocess everything. So getting those two eyes equalized is generally a pretty good practice. So brock string and active focus, really when it comes to the eyes, those are going to be the two main things that you want to consider. After that, then we get into moving away from the eyes and seeing like what else could actually contribute to your vision. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is around fuel. So your eyes use up a really high amount of energy compared to the rest of the brain. Your visual system pretty much makes up about 50% of all the brain cells that you have. And because of that, your eyes are going to require quite a lot of energy to kind of keep that clear visual picture going at all times. And that means that there is a metabolic component to vision that people often don't consider. So when we think of metabolism, we need to have enough glucose going to the brain at all times. We need to have enough oxygen going to the brain at all times. Those two things combined together create the chemical reaction that creates energy. And if you're having problems with your vision, it might be worth looking into metabolism in general. So that's something you're probably going to want to go and do with your nutritionist. You know, I can talk through little bits in a session with you, but generally it can be a good idea to just look at healthy eating in general. It can also be worth getting bloods done and finding out, things like insulin levels and stuff like that. It's actually quite common for things like diabetes for people to report their vision gets way better for a short period of time, and then they start to find that it gets pretty bad. And you might also even notice, if you start paying attention to your visual acuity on a daily basis, that when you have been engaging in things like super high amounts of sugar or alcohol, especially, that you might find that, things look a little bit more blurry than they did the day before, day after that you've been engaging in that stuff. So metabolism from the glucose side can be really important, and nutrition is going to be the way forward with that. The other thing that you especially might want to look into is oxygen supply. So your body, as much as it's able to, will regulate the glucose on its own, unless we are really feeding it way too much. Then usually it tries to monitor your blood sugar and keep that stuff in balance. But the oxygen, on the other hand, it's very likely that if we are not breathing properly, that we might be struggling to get enough oxygen to our brains at all time. Counterintuitively, the more we kind of hyperventilate, which is super common if you are breathing a lot through your mouth, if you are dealing with things like anxiety an awful lot, or if you just talk a whole lot and really fast, then you might actually find that your brain is blowing off a lot of its carbon dioxide. And while that means there's more oxygen in the bloodstream, it actually makes it harder for that oxygen to get into the cells, because we need an equal amount of carbon dioxide to kind of swap and replace it on the way in. So for a lot of people, actually improving their tolerance to carbon dioxide, teaching the brain that it's okay to have more carbon dioxide in the system, actually lets the brain take in more oxygen overall, and that actually can get more chemical reactions to create this energy happening in the brain at any one time. Only final thing I guess I'll say about the metabolic side of this is that if you're trying to make your vision better, it's probably not going to be a good idea to also at the same time be engaging in something like a ketogenic diet or fasting, or something that kind of really restricts your calories a whole lot, or especially that restricts your glucose a whole lot. So, keto will convert fat into glucose, but that actually takes more energy. And that's why people are recommending it for things like weight loss and stuff like that, because it takes more energy to actually get the energy. That can have its pros, but it can also have its cons when it comes to the brain relearning and learning new things. That is going to be a pretty big con. So a couple other things that I'll chat, and then I will leave you to it today. Next up, after the metabolic side of things, we've got the vestibular system. So this is something that I talk about all the time on this channel. The vestibular system are the little spirit levels that live inside your ears that help tell you which way up you are and whether or not your head is moving. Okay, your vestibular system is what we normally think of as the balance organs. But what's interesting about balance is that the vestibular system doesn't figure out balance just on its own. It is connected, obviously, with the body. That's going to be really important. It's not useful to say you're falling if you don't have connections to the muscles to actually correct that. But more interestingly for eyesight is that the vestibular system is also strongly connected to the eyes as well. So while the vestibular system tells us whether our head's moving, whether we're going up and down, whether we're speeding up or slowing down, it also relies on input coming from the eyes to say whether or not we are flat or whether or not we are level. If our eyes see a horizontal horizon, then that is a pretty strong vote of confidence in the fact that we are upright and balanced. And if that starts to change, then combined with the information from the vestibular system, that tells us that we need to do something about that. Now, what that means is that if our vestibular system starts to degrade over time, and for pretty much all humans, your vestibular system will start to degrade over time. I don't know whether that is specifically human specific, like because we have such sedentary lifestyles and things like that, or whether it's just a kind of fact across nature that all animals will see their vestibular system degrade over time. Can't answer that one, but we do know that it does happen. And the less input the vestibular system is having on our balance, the more our brain will rely on the visual system to start making those predictions for us. And this is where the problem comes, because if the visual system is now making more effort to figure out stuff that isn't related directly to vision, then it is going to have less energy available to create that nice visual picture that's really clear and sharp. So anytime that we see eyesight is getting worse, especially if we find that, the metabolic side of things and the active focus side of things isn't helping it, the very next place that we absolutely want to look is the vestibular system. And we want to start testing. If I were to look, so I've got a little band here, and if I were to look at one of these small little letters and I start moving my head around while I'm staring at the letter, so I'm stimulating the vestibular system and making it work harder, what does that do to the visual picture? If I start finding that turning my head starts to make things go a little bit blurry, then this is a sign that I actually want to strengthen my vestibular system in order to benefit my visual system. So with that in mind, we're going to obviously want to work on balance. Specifically, we're going to want to work on balance with our eyes closed, and even better if we can be working on balance with our eyes closed where our head is moving around. The better we get the function of the vestibular system going, then we'll find that when we open our eyes, the vestibular system is doing its job. And so our eyes don't have to take the reins when it comes to that kind of movement, and it can have more energy to focus on other aspects of the day. So those are kind of the main things when it comes to improving your eyesight. The final thing that I will also talk about is a lot of the time the muscles and joints around your neck can also be a factor. And what we will find there, this is less because of the muscles and joints individually, but more a kind of tie in with the kind of metabolic side of things, with the vestibular side of things, with the lens of the eye. The more mobility that you have in your neck, as well as the stability at the same time. So if you're hypermobile, you might find that vision actually just starts to degrade a little bit faster than it should. But if you've got good mobility in your neck and good strength in your neck at the same time, then you actually might find that your visual system can remain stronger for longer. So if none of the rest of the information is kind of getting you anywhere, the next thing I would say is actually look to your neck. Number one movement that people lack in the neck is lateral movement. So this ability to move the head side to side. 90% of the people who come in for all sorts of issues, complaints, including vision, tend to not be able to move their neck laterally in any kind of smooth fashion whatsoever. So that's probably the first thing that I would go to look at. But all different types of neck range is going to be really, really useful. Another video that you might want to look at on our channel is suboccipital stretches and contractions. So basically, to stretch your suboccipital muscles, they're the muscles that sit right at the back of the head that can actually play a big role in stabilizing the skull. All you got to do, tuck the chin back, turn the head all the way away from the side you're trying to stretch. Then if you want to contract it, you're going to push the chin forward, turn all the way towards. Okay, and if we just start putting both of those movements together and really trying to feel the sensation in these suboccipital muscles. I don't know if you can see, but they're kind of sitting right at the back of the head up on this diagram. Those muscles are going to get stronger. They're going to get better at stabilizing the skull. When the skull is in a more stable position, the brain is going to feel more comfortable to put effort into contracting the lens muscles in the eye. So I hope all that was interesting. I hope some of that was useful. That was a pretty short version of these live videos. I'm trying to get more of this up and uploaded now. So if there's any issues that you'd like me to cover, the REWAR approach to, do let me know. If you are interested in a session, if you are interested in our vision training tool, those links are all in the description below. So I'm just going to go ahead and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.